Hello and welcome to Mentoring Myself. This is a transformational podcast. I'm Natalie Whyte. I am a transformational lifestyle coach. So I help people make every day a good day instead of just a big glamorous life. And also have this lovely podcast where I get to interview experts in their fields that give us advice that they would have liked to have given their younger selves. So today, I'm joined by Damian Schmidt. He is in radio. He's on Mix FM. You can catch him every weekday. Please remind me the name of the show when you introduce yourself. It just went out of my head. And he's also a voiceover artist. He's been doing it for over 10 years. So, Damian, I'm going to hand it over to you. You're much more professional at doing this kind of thing.
Sweet, Nat. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. So I've work on the radio in weekdays and then try my hand at voiceover work as well. My show on Mix FM is called the Midday Mix. It's Monday to Friday, 11 to 1 p.m. So try and fit like everything in between those two things.
Cool. That sounds lovely. I'm just, before I put you on the spot, at some point later, I've seen you do your voiceover challenges, and I found them very entertaining. So I might just ask you to do that later, giving a little bit of a pre-warning there. But
Okay.
the show is obviously all about what advice you would like to give your younger self. So I'd love to hear it.
There's actually so much. One of the things about working in the radio and then in voiceover work, especially, is it's a very difficult job to gauge because it's not a traditional job in the sense of you've got someone who comes to you and says, okay, good job, you've done this right, or you're on the right track. You either doing it well or you're not doing it well. One thing I've learned, and I wish I'd known this a bit sooner in my career, was that you're actually only as good as the last time you worked. And that's the kind of standard that you've got to hold yourself up. You're only as good as your last voiceover. You're only as good as your last show that you've done. So it's a very freeing line of work, but it's also incredibly stressful a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. Because like I say, it's not a traditional job that you're doing. So day to day can be a little bit stressful. Working as a voiceover artist, it is a freelancing position. So it's nice in that you work for yourself and you determine your own hours. If the client needs something, you decide, when you can deliver it. But at the same time, you've got to be quite proactive and go out and search for work. So in the line of voiceover work, I wish that I had been a bit more proactive in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I think this pandemic has really taught me about being proactive, because all of a sudden the whole world kind of changed and you're not going into studios anymore, really. Mm-hmm. You're recording from home. It broadened my horizons in that it kind of forced me to put myself out there online. So a lot of the work I've been doing over the past 13, 14 months has been more overseas work and has been more online work than mm-hmm. what I traditionally do here in South Africa for radio or television.
Yeah. I love that, because everyone can see, obviously the listeners won't be able to see your setup, but the viewers can certainly see you've got this gorgeous microphone. I've got a little one for my podcast, but you've got this lovely microphone. You've got the proper earphones and everything, so you really set up nicely for for what you got to do. And it reminds me, I was watching a video yesterday by it was Simon Sinek. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's absolutely great work. I'll send you a link. But he was talking about how it's not really, what it really comes down to is about adapting, because there's always change going on in the world, always things going on in the world. And human beings we've had pandemics before, we've had world wars, we've had things, and things don't go back to normal. They go back to a different way, but if we adapt, we actually end up thriving. So, for me, you've got your setup, you're working more overseas and not going into studio. And actually, I'm sure that has probably, brought you in more business, probably expanded your horizons and your network and all of that. So it's all for good, right?
No, 100%. It was very scary in the beginning, because I think we all kind of find ourselves in a position of unknowingness. Like, what does the future bring? I myself am someone who's very anxious about that. I often find myself fixating on what's coming or what needs to be done, instead of just like breathe What do you have control over? What can you do? If you're worrying about this, should you plan for it? Is there any work you can do for it to try and calm that anxiety? And, if you can't, I need to kind of get on to doing something else. I find that I struggle a bit with that, like, fixation that comes with that anxiety. But this has been a good lesson. I think in a lot of ways it's been a very difficult lesson, and it's been very difficult in terms of work, because like I said at the beginning, work kind of went away. I moonlight as a quiz host as well, that I do a couple of times a week. And I mean, with the entertainment industry shut down and the bar shut down, there was like one source of income that was just gone. So got some of the gear that I had previously been using for voiceover work, and we had to work from home at a certain stage with the radio station, and then set up online profiles, started putting together demo tapes, actively going out and looking for work. And it's really benefited me in that it's allowed me more work so I can better practice my craft. And also financially, it's a big help for money that, had I not ventured out and seen what the online world has to offer, would probably have never been able to tap that kind of work stream.
Oh, that's good. That's great. Oh, we've got an echo. So I wanted to ask another question. It's the same thing. It's to do with more personally. What advice would you give to your younger self? Personal advice, not necessarily in your field that you're in, but just as an individual. What would you have said to your younger self if you could have a meeting?
Be less critical on yourself. That voice on the inside that no one else hears at times can be quite rude isn't the word, but quite terrible. You can be very terrible about yourself, to yourself. So if I had any advice, I'd say that that internal little monologue that you often hear, that's talking to yourself, which is really strange, isn't always the best. Sometimes it's good because it serves as a bit of motivation to get you out of a slump, and it knocks you right. But a lot of the time, you just aren't a really kind person to yourself, speaking of myself, of course. So I would say, like, maybe pay a little less attention to that voice and focus on what you actually need to do. Because often, that you end up getting a little bit paralyzed because you just get this anxiety, you get kind of overwhelmed because of how you talk to yourself. You kind of put yourself out of the game before you've even started. So that would probably be one of the bigger things that I would have to say to my younger self if I could.
I love that. I love that advice, because actually I resonate so much. Last year during the lockdown, I wasn't doing this yet. And the other work streams that I was doing, I had to sort of start up again, and there was a few months without work, and it was really difficult. And that voice, that exact voice that you're talking about, was paralyzing me. It was putting me into a mind state where if I was creating any work or business, it was always in the state of desperation. So it wasn't really flying. And then otherwise it was just making me feel like I had no power to do anything. And where must I go? How must I do this? So any help that came my way externally, I ended up just nullifying it, because I was like, oh, but I can't do this. I can't do this. And what I learned through that process was really to take that voice, listen to it just a little bit, just in case, because sometimes it gives you a good insight into the obstacles or challenges, and sort of write them down, like, okay, you know what, I actually must remember to do this, that, or that. But then also look at it and go, this voice isn't actually giving me any power. It's making me feel paralyzed. It's making me feel unable to do stuff. So you know what? I've heard enough from you, little voice. Thank you for showing me what the potential challenges are, but it's not giving me a lot of power to listen to you. So I really that has been my personal journey as well. So I resonate with that advice. I think it's great advice.
And I think there's a lot of people out there who also resonate with it, where you kind of think back and you think to yourself, had I not been so critical on myself, had I spent a bit more time focusing on what I could do instead of what I can't do, what kind of position would I be in right now? Would I have started that business venture 2-3 years ago? Would I have, pursued the person I was interested in? I mean, it kind of goes throughout any facet of life, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you know Chris Palmer, he's also been on the show as well.
Mm.
I think he's possibly been a mentor to you in some way in your
Oh,
life as well.
100%. Love Mr.
Mm-mm.
Palmer.
Yes. So and he also gave a similar, you know, similar advice along those lines. Is he was, you know, he's in finances now, and he said that
Mm.
something like each person, you know, these people who are very successful, they end up opening, let's say, 7 enterprises or 10 enterprises, and they have to fail so many times before they actually get 9 income streams or whatever going. So it ends
Yeah.
up being something like you need to have started something like 60 ventures that have failed before you actually, you know, get super successful. So I'm trying to beat that statistic right now.
Yeah.
You know.
There's a lovely analogy for that, because I often even find myself looking at people who are kind of achieving success, or that you look to and you're like, wow, you know, you see those people out there, you're like, damn, you've obviously got all your ducks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
You know what you're doing. And I was listening to some other podcast, and they were kind of explaining it in the way that it's like looking at someone standing on an iceberg. You see them standing there on this little piece of ice, but you don't see all of that's gone into them and their success, all that hard work, all that failure. You might only see just that stuff on the surface, but you don't see all the trials and tribulations and all kinds of stuff that they've really struggled with over the years. You just see them at that point where they are now, and not where they were, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like my life as an example, you know, I started in psychology and then worked into education. So I was always sort of coaching and mentoring and working with kids all the time. And then, you know, only later did sort of all the pieces come together. Even I didn't know what they would come together to be, you know. And it's those years of this connection, that network, study this, study that, get exposed to this, get exposed to that, and eventually it builds up into something, you know. And it's years and years of building and learning and putting things together, and then eventually sort of reaching a point where suddenly it just flows, you know. So yeah.
Do you think that it's important to go through all of those kind of experiences and failures and connections that you meet along the way to prepare you for what is to come? Because maybe if you had pursued it later without any of those other lessons that you've learned or anything like that, you might be setting yourself up for a bit of failure.
You know, I'll try to take, it's a very long answer that I have to that, but I'll try to take it a short answer. I feel like life is, you know, it's basically you start out small and you sort of expand, you grow and you develop. And, you know, at the age of 2, you're not going to self-actualize, you know. And at the age of like 25 necessarily, you're not going to completely self-actualize. You know, you're going to eventually get to a point when you self-actualize, and then it's like a very Jungian concept, but it's sort of like you expand, you become the full expression of yourself. And then you sort of calm down a bit. You don't have to be expressing every part of yourself once you get to that sort of an age, because you've sort of mastered what the expression of yourself is. You know, so so I think that it's not so much about that you have to go through these failures, you have to do all these networks, but I think you just keep growing and expanding and whatever, because what you're doing now, you're successful at already, but that doesn't mean that you fully become the expression of what you could be. And you 100%. Maybe don't even know what you're going to be yet. It could be something that comes along pipelines, and what you've done now does equip you to be that. So I think it's really like, to not use the cliche, but I have to, it's the journey, you know, it's the journey of expansion and becoming, and not becoming yourself. It's not like at one point in time you're suddenly going to be your full self. I think the full self is, it's the full self is you from birth right to the end. That is your full self. You know, so to take ourselves out of the, just in this moment, is everything perfect? It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to all be perfect right now, because your whole living experience, your whole life is actually what you are. You're not just yourself in one moment. You're yourself over the entire expression of time, you know. So yeah, that's how I sort of feel about it. You know, you're not going to get really a short answer out of me. And well done for switching it around here, and you doing the questioning radio show host.
Sorry, force of habit.
Oh, but I love it. You know, we can go on for hours. So it's always lucky to chat to you. Okay, so it's time for some fun. Can I put you on the spot? Can you do some sort of cool voice ad thing. Just make it up. Just do it fun. Because I've watched your little games where you do that. And I don't know, sell this podcast or sell your show or something like that. I don't know.
It's so difficult without a script. I've become so used to having something to read. That like if there isn't something there, my mind gets paralyzed.
I understand. That's pretty funny. Okay, so give us your best voice, just promoting your show then, where people can where they can catch you, what time it is, and what you guys do on the show, what kind of music's on there, that kind of thing.
That I can do.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, so my name's Damian Schmidt. I host the Midday Mix from 9 to 11 weekdays on Mix 93.8 FM. My show is all about the craziness that happens all around the world. One of my favorites features that I get to do each day is called News of the Stupid. So we focus on funny criminals, funny people, weird family members, whatever. Just anything that tickles our fancy at the time. Our music style is nice and eclectic. We love our rock and roll from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and then some really, really nice essay music drizzled over that. So catch me 9 to 11. Oh no, oh, there we go. Wrong, giving the wrong.
I told you I'm going to put you on the spot.
It's all good. I should be better at it. That's actually it's bad.
Ooh, no, it's not, because now that's that little voice, right, telling you you need to do some improv a little bit more.
Exactly. You should at least know when your show starts. 11 to 1 p.m.
No, I think it's because I put you like on the spot there that everything just.
That's good. You got my heart beating. It's been a while.
That's nice. Yeah, it's good to get a bit of adrenaline in the system, you know.
Yeah,
healthy
100%.
adrenaline. Okay, it's an absolute pleasure talking to you always, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And is there anything else you want to end off with, a message or something?
Yeah, throughout my journey, through the kind of various avenues that I've gone with my work, it's always been a very big creative base, non-traditional, and throughout that, there's always been people who have said, "Are you crazy? What are you doing? You need to do this, you need to do that." And the biggest thing I can say to you is go and approach whatever you want to do with everything you've got. There's too many people that are out there saying, you're not going to make a thing of this. It's too difficult. It's going to be, way too much to kind of surpass any kind of expectation that you might have for yourself. But often those are the wrong people that you're listening to. They aren't people who are successful at what you want to do. Listen to the people who do what you want to do or are involved in it in some way. Take advice from those people. Don't, there's also a nice cliche that says, you wouldn't take advice from someone who's not an expert in that field. Never do it. Just, it's been very painful over the years to be approached by family members, friends, people I've been dating, saying the same thing. And, if you bow down to what they expect of you and their expectations of you, how are you ever going to be happy? So that's what I have to add.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, definitely. The other podcasts that I've had, it's definitely come through from other people that you need to do what you want. And there's lots of naysayers and lots of people who don't have your dream, and so they don't really see the steps ahead that you can necessarily see. And the people who do have the steps ahead, of course, the experts who've done it already. So I think that's a great little nugget to end off with.
Thank you, Nat. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's been an absolute blast. I can't believe the time has already shot by like this.
It disappears. It's so fun.
Yeah.
I appreciate you being on. Thank you so much. It's really been fun to chat to you and hear all your tidbits. And it was very entertaining to put a radio show host on the spot for a change.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay safe. And thanks again for having me on.
It's a total pleasure. Bye, my friend.
Bye-bye.